And I want to bend you as I am bent to nip your neck, unclasping your lapis blue necklace. Ever notice how it keeps you from talking? You're going to do a lot of talking, and no small amount of yowling. Are you certain you should have come? I may never release you. Oh, descend. Oh, lower yourself to love in the underground, the union of a woman to one other woman, not self to self, but self to other self. Slap your feet flat on the earth now, heel first preferably, thrust your pelvis forward. You see, I'm about to change your center of gravity. As for those explanatory notes and diagrams tucked under your arm, put them down. You won't need them. You will be too busy with your own internal computations. As I lick between your fingers, slipping off the golden rings of definition and adherence. Oh, descend to me. Lower yourself into yourself as I go down and go down and go down to you. So here I think what she's evoking is that there's this other side of love, which is when the double is, and I was kind of referencing this, when the double is evoked, there's this, you're kind of you're taken over by it, but there's this terrible descent, and in this pattern, this archetypal pattern, what she does is strips away everything you ever thought you were, and who you thought you were. And an example of this in my own life is I'm somebody who thinks a lot. I'm a thinking type in Jungian typology. I think a lot, and that's how I manage the world, is by thinking. And when I started to do this process of the psychoanalytic center, I was diagnosed with a serious cancer. And as a result of that, and I lost the vision in one of my eyes. And as a result of that, my ability to function in the way that I usually function, which is thinking and reading, and spending my time that way, has been completely taken away from me. I mean, not completely, but profoundly, because I have to spend all my time with my body and taking care of my body, which in Jungian typology, that's down for me. It's like, I don't want to go there, just like, let me think about things, but I don't want to go down into my body and how my body feels. As I survived childhood trauma by staying in my head. And going into my body means feeling difficult feeling states that I would rather not feel. But there is this sense, so as I was getting ready for this talk, I was like, I can't read, what am I going to do? And it was very clear that what I was supposed to do was try to feel into my relationship with my double, to try to feel her presence. And my feeling is that the cancer is, among many other things, is, it's so hard to talk about lesbian eros! Okay. That's, probably something in my psyche that comes in and wants to interrupt here. But anyways, my point, I'm sure I have one, is to feel into her presence and to feel that actually, that I have to surrender to this teaching. That this is a teaching. It's like this is a teaching that says if you're going to talk about lesbian eros and you're going to talk about lesbian eros, you have to be in your body and you have to get into your body. And I actually just refused to do it up until now, and now my life depends on it. And so I look at that as an act of my double, that she's saying to me, like, if you want to get together with me, and if we're going to actually have this relationship that is erotic and powerful, then you need to get into your body. You can't do this defensive thinking that you've been doing anymore. So that's my that's my job here, and it's part of why there's a lot of terror in me right now, because I'm trying to lead here from a different function than I usually lead from, and I'm usually leading from my thinking, and my thinking's still here, but it's very, very challenging to lead from some other function, lead from my body. But she's here, and I see this as basically she's like Erich. This is like Erich Kegel pulling me down into the underworld and saying, you want to become yourself, you want to become who you really are, you want to stand to the forces of lesbian oppression in your psyche, then this is what you have to do. You have to get into your body. And it can be like, it is experienced as a descent. And love can be experienced that way. So, okay. I'm reading through this. Anna Freud had a longtime lover. They were together for like 50 years. Ruth Benedict and Margaret Mead. And I want to also claim for lesbians in the current society, I want to claim the, quote, invention of multiculturalism. Because, and speaking from my experience, that lesbians, at the time of the civil rights movement, there were various groups who were all focused on different kinds of civil rights issues. There was a Black Power movement, there was a women's liberation movement, and each of those groups was interested in its own, making an identity, forming an identity of its own group. But the lesbians, they were interested in that too, but the lesbians were, from the very beginning, interested in how do we reach out to women of color? How do we reach out to women of color? How do we reach out to working class women? How do we reach out and integrate our movement? Because lesbians want to love all the women, basically. And the movement is driven by Eros. So we don't want to exclude anybody. And we were the first ones to have sign language at signing, remember?
Sure.
Yeah?
Still today.
Yeah, at concerts, we were the first ones to do that. Have handicap access. I'm saying these are powerful innovations in the culture, and they're driven by this relationship with the double, and they're driven by this lesbian eros and this desire. Okay. So, all right, I'm going to talk a little psychological theory here, so my thinking kids can get in here. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about what happens in the Oedipal dynamic. I want to talk about psychologically what happens here. Okay. So, basically, there's a pre-Oedipal stage where the baby and the mother are, and I'm talking here object relations. There's a pre-Oedipal stage where the baby and the mother are in a relationship, and the mother's job is to mirror the baby and hold the baby and make the baby feel safe. If all goes well, then in the next stage, the baby feels safe in the world and feels like she has a right to exist and that she's a wonderful person in her own right. And then around 3, the Oedipal dynamic kicks in and the little lesbian girl falls in love with her mother. Through the frustration, this is like kind of classical Freudian theory, except Freud didn't talk about what happens to gay people in this way, but it's real simple, it's basic, we just sort of, it seems obvious that's what happens. And through the frustration of the incest wish, the love object is repressed into the down into the psyche, and becomes, from a Jungian point of view, is transformed. That mother figure, that beloved erotic mother figure, is transformed into the soul figure, this double, okay, who emerges then at the latency stage, like who emerges then at the time of adolescence, and then begins to get projected out onto first love. But that's a figure in the psyche that is comes about as a result of the frustration of the incest wish. Okay. And so she takes the form of a soul. Now, Jung's idea is that this is actually like a person in the psyche. It's not like an abstract. I know maybe it sounds abstract, but she actually can be experienced as a person in the psyche. And the reason for this is that she is then inviting the ego of the lesbian to make a relationship with the unconscious. She invites relationship with the unconscious by being actually a person in the psyche. Yeah? Huh?
I just have a question about
Yeah.
how do you explain, so far it sounds like most of what you keep explaining is the idea that goes towards the feminine. What happens to the woman who doesn't identify with the feminine, but identifies completely with the masculine?
Oh, okay. So what happens in the Oedipal stage?
Whichever stage.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so what happens?
What's your explanation for what happens to the female that really does not identify at all with the feminine, but really totally takes on the masculine?
Right on. Okay. That's a really good question for lesbians. It's a good lesbian question.
Let's have the kids and everybody else talk about it.
All right. My kids like to talk about that. Okay. So in the Oedipal stage of development, so in the pre-Oedipal stage, it's just really mommy and baby. Okay. But in the Oedipal stage, what happens is that the lesbian girl, falls in love with her mother, okay, and in order to woo her, she identifies with the father. Okay, so there's the kind of ego of the lesbian has an identification with the masculine, with the father, and is maybe even in competition with the father for the mother. Okay. And then there's a masculine identification in the erotic engagement. It's like,
does it follow the standard Freudian where we got to get rid of dad in order to get mom, or does it take that on? Or do we keep dad as a model?
Well, there's probably I'm sure there's competition for dad. And we'd like to get rid of him.
I just wonder how much of the Oedipal does the female follow?
Yeah, it's classic. It's just, why should it be any different? Yeah, we identify with the father, Freud has some weird ideas about what happens to women.
Yeah.
That's like a subject for a later talk. That kind of, so I think, basically his idea about what happens to heterosexual boys, which is what his model is, I think that can be employed, for everybody. He's really good about defenses. In other words, Freud's idea about why things come about is because we have to defend against certain things. And he's really good about talking about how things happen defensively. There's the defending against castration for example. The boy, you know, he like competes with the father, but then to defend against castration, he like gives up the competition, and then he makes an allegiance with the father, okay? But in Jungian psychology, it's not so much about defenses. It's just sort of, it's more about like this more teleological, it's more moving toward the future, and this idea of individuation and the engine that drives the psyche, what drives it as opposed to what's being defended against. So what I'm articulating here is more about what's driving. Okay.